afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Request all of you to take your seats, please. We are starting our next session. So session 1 and 2, before lunch, we spoke about steel and scrap outlook. Session 2 was more on financing the steel trade. Now session 3 talks about India's steel demand, supply dynamics, and key factors influencing procurement decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I understand it is the hardest session after lunch, but believe you me, this session is very content heavy, and you would be delighted to hear from the industry experts. As you know, India is entering a phase where value creation, customer centricity, and collaboration across the supply chain will define the future of steel. This session will explore steel demand outlook, procurement strategies, structural steel adoption, product innovation, end user expectations, building resilient supply chains. I would now invite each of the eminent speaker on the stage one by one to initiate session number 3. The first speaker in line is Mr. Girish Kumar Kadam, Senior VP and Group Head, Corporate Sector Ratings, ICRA. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Kadam, please? Mr. Rajiv Moitra, Partner, Deloitte India. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Mr. T.N. Natarajan, Director, Commercial Sale, sir. Mr. Sanchit Soni, Vice President, Jindal Ferrous Limited. Mr. Neeraj Agrawal, Chief Operating Officer, Tata Projects. This session will be moderated by Mr. K. Senthil Nathan. But before I hand it over to him, let me introduce Mr. K. Senthil Nathan to all of you. He is the Chief Operating Officer, M Junction Services Limited, an alumnus of NIT Warangal, where he leads multiple strategic business verticals, including e-auctions, loyalty programs, and online stores. He is responsible for driving revenue growth, operational excellence, business expansion, and profitability across the organization. Mr. K. Senthil Nathan, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. While Amit said that this is going to be a challenging session, but with the kind of personalities who are on the dais, I'm sure all of us are excited to hear from all of them. Each one is a leading industry luminary. On the stage, we have a mixture of representatives from different parts of the steel ecosystem. We have the consultant in terms of Deloitte. We have ICRA, who is the rating agency. We have 2 large steel manufacturers, and we have one of the largest consumers of steel in India, representing their respective companies on the stage here. So the 13th Indian Steel Markets Conference, we welcome all of you. This session is to explore details in terms of is it only the capacity addition which has been talked about in the last several years. Now I think we are at a stage where we also need to look at things beyond just capacity addition. We are looking at newer areas of steel usage. We are looking at growth in steel demand, but in terms of steel adoption in construction and infrastructure is an area where which needs to be explored. We are also seeing evolving customer requirements. We are also discussed in the first 2 sessions in terms of need for balancing sustainability, objectives which have been set out, at the same time being competitive in the market. So the next phase of growth will depend not only on adding capacity, but on creating demand. promoting value-added applications and building stronger collaboration across the steel industry. Technology and digital platforms are also becoming an important enabler in this direction. Platforms such as M-Junction have helped transform steel procurement, marketing, price discovery, and market access over the last 2 decades. This demonstrates how digital ecosystem can improve transparency, efficiency, and connectivity across the value chain. Therefore, the challenge before us is very clear. How do we simultaneously accelerate adoption, improve competitiveness, and deliver sustainable growth? So we will begin with the industry outlook. I request Mr. Girish Kadam to start the proceedings. Before he comes on here, I'll give a brief introduction of Mr. Girish Kadam. Mr. Girish Kadam is the Senior Vice President and Group Head Corporate Ratings at ICRA. He's been associated with ICRA for the last 23 years and is part of the rating committee at ICRA. He's also had a stint at Moody's office in Singapore. He's also on the board of ICRA's ESG ratings since May 2025. Mr. Kadam is an alumnus from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies and a BTech in Chemical Engineering from Institute of Chemical Technology. Please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Girish Kadam, please.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you, M-Junction, for giving us the opportunity to be here, to be part of this prestigious event. I have a brief context-setting presentation on the steel sector outlook, the key trends and the outlook. We'll first run through this slide. You can clearly see the demand trends in the steel, how cyclical it is, right, historically. We have seen, quite impressive growth post-COVID, well about 10%. And of late, it has come down. But having said that, we expect, the steel demand recovery to remain at about 9 to 10%, thanks to, the quite significant, capex budget, which is outlined by the Government of India. You can clearly see 12.5 lakh crore is the government capex budget in FY27, and out of that, almost 65 to 70% of the capex is in steel-intensive sectors, sectors like railways, roads, and so on and so forth. So, fundamentally, government capex will also, drive, the steel sector demand, which has been the case in the past as well. So that's the cyclicality that we are talking of. Over and above that, the private sector capex and the investment pipeline in sectors like, capital goods, which is a reflection of, the investment potential which is being panned out in the entire power sector value chain, will also boost, the steel sector demand in the days to come. So infrastructure, buildings, construction typically accounts for almost 60 to 65% of the steel demand. And that's where both government capex and the private capex will have an important role to play. So you can clearly see here some of the stats which I've just mentioned in the previous slide. The government capex has actually grown quite significantly at a CAGR of 19% over the last 6 years. That's a very impressive, the capex budget growth that we have seen. And also on the railway side, the capex, plan on the railway side is also fairly significant, with a growth of 10% expected in the current year as per the budget plan. So these numbers certainly support, the demand recovery and the demand outlook, which is fairly robust, as far as the steel sector is concerned in the near term, and the fundamental drivers which I've highlighted earlier that will continue to support, the steel sector demand even in the long run. A few slides on the steel trade flows. We see that, the exports, on the steel exports from India are likely to remain subdued in the current year, given that, there are tighter restrictions coming up in EU, thanks to CBAM implementation, which is already effective. And so we expect, the exports to remain subdued. And just to put things into perspective, uh, EU itself accounts for almost 40% of, the finished steel exports. That was the data point for FY26. And with that, these kind of CBAM implementation measures will have impact on the steel export volumes, from India. On the import side, yes, thanks to the safeguard duty measures which are effective since last almost 1 year, the imports are likely to remain subdued. The import dependency is low. We expect the imports to remain at about 6 million metric tons, and they will remain subdued thanks to these protection measures which are currently in place, which are quite positive and which was really required, for the steel sector, for the local mills. Just to illustrate some, the dynamics in terms of, how the pricing looks like vis-a-vis the import parity, you can clearly see, thanks to, the safeguard duty support, and also the fact that rupee has depreciated by almost 10 to 12% over the last 10 to 12 months, there is a good amount of discount which is still there if we compare the domestic HRC price vis-a-vis the import parity price, from China. The domestic prices are at about $40 per ton discount vis-a-vis the import parity after factoring the safeguard duty and the customs duty and other costs. So, and that is also getting supported, as I mentioned, thanks to rupee depreciation. If rupee would not have depreciated, this discount may not have been there. Rupee has actually depreciated by almost 10%. So that is also supporting, this kind of buffer which is there, for the domestic steel mills, and the pricing is still at discount. But having said that, the China pricing, the HRC pricing in China remains a key monitorable, because if there were to be any decline and the pricing pressures in China HRC price levels, obviously, that would pose, the pricing pressures on an import parity principle basis even for the domestic mills, right? So the China pricing continues to remain a key monitorable from the sector standpoint. In terms of the raw material scenario, as we are aware, the iron ore prices have been fairly stable. The median pricing for the iron ore is about 4,000 rupees a ton. It has gone up of late. By and large, pretty stable. We have seen some 2-3% jump up in the prices for the iron ore of late, but otherwise the prices have remained fairly stable. Unlike coking coal, where it's a very significant cost item for any steel operations. And that's where, the prices have actually gone up and will pose, the cost headwinds for these steel makers. Both iron ore and, coking coal comprises almost, 35 to 40% of the cost structure. It's a significant cost item. In terms of the near-term outlook, as I said, if you look at, the capacity utilization trends, for the steel industry, it was moderate. It got moderated in last 2 years, FY25-26. Utilization fell down to 76-77% from the level of 80% which was there in FY24, largely because of the moderation in the demand to some extent, and more importantly, there was a lumpiness in terms of the steel capacity addition which happened over the last 2-3 years. You can clearly see the installed capacity has gone up from about 180 million metric tons to about 220 as on March 26. Almost 40 million metric tons of capacity got added in last 2 years. So there was a bit of lumpiness, and that is getting absorbed by the market thanks to the demand recovery that we are seeing from number of user sectors. So we expect with the demand recovery in place, the capacity utilization for the steel sector to cross well above 80% in the current year. Of course, on the expansion plans are pretty significant by all the leading players in the industry. You can clearly clearly see as on March 26, the installed steel capacity is about 218 million metric tons. This is based on the public domain announcements. We see that almost 70 million metric tons of capex is outlined by all the prominent, steel makers over the next 5 to 6 years. That's a very large capex which is currently underway. And from the credit standpoint, as a rating agency, what we also would like to highlight is the extent of the debt which is per ton of the steel, which is very reasonable, which is also one of the lowest, which is about $180 per ton, the bank debt, based on the consolidated aggregate analysis of the steel sector players. And that puts, the sector fairly in a comfortable position in terms of, ability to have that ability to withstand any external exogenous shocks, which is pretty important for any player in the cyclical industry, the way the steel sector operates. So these are the two important takeaways from this slide. Certainly the capex plans are quite significant. And with that background, let me also highlight, the sector outlook on the steel sector is stable. We have certain thresholds when it comes to, the sector outlooks. One of the key thresholds that we have is the EBITDA per ton, which we actually monitor very closely based on the aggregate analysis of, these top 4 players. We expect the EBITDA per ton to remain anywhere between $100 to $150 per ton, and that's the stable threshold range. We are expecting that number to remain at about $110 a ton. We have seen a cyclicality in this, EBITDA per ton movement over the last 6 years, as you can clearly see. Just after COVID, thanks to, the steel pricing phenomena, the kind of steel pricing that we saw, EBITDA per ton was one of the best and the highest across the cycles for the steel players. And then obviously, with the correction in the steel pricing, HRC pricing in China because of the overcapacity and the real estate overhang, which is still persisting in China markets, as everyone is aware of, it has seen a significant correction. But having said that, we expect these numbers to remain at about $100, $115 a ton, on an average basis for the sector, and we have a stable outlook on the steel sector. On the green steel, last few slides, certainly there are certain steps which have happened in a positive direction. The first thing which has happened is the notification of the green taxonomy, which is certainly a big positive step in advancing this national mission program on the green steel. If you see the average carbon emission intensity for, the steel player is 2.5 tons of CO2 per ton of steel, which is pretty high vis-a-vis what we see otherwise for some of the, few global players, leading players outside. As per this taxonomy, the green rated steel will be ranked, based on, the carbon emission intensity. For a 5-star green rated steel, the emission intensity requirement has to be less than 1.6. And this 1.6, so that means there is a gap of almost 0.9, right, with respect to the average number that we see for most of the steel players in India. So there is a long way to go. So how to do that? So there are various ways in which, the CO2 emission can be minimized, of course, through the use of renewable energy in the operations, and minimizing the energy footprint dependency on the conventional side. That's a very obvious thing. But more than that, there are other ways in which, we can actually, have a green steel migration as well, and there is still a long way to go. If you see the maths and the overall cost economics involved, certainly the DRI-EAF route with a green hydrogen is the route where the carbon emission intensity in the steel operations can fall down as below as 0.2, 0.3, but it comes at a cost. Assuming the green hydrogen cost at $4.5 per kg, we see that the levelized cost of steel in a DRI-EAF route with a green hydrogen is almost $190 per ton higher vis-a-vis the conventional BF route steel, which is just about 600. So we are talking of a premium of $190 per ton in a DRI-EAF with a green hydrogen route. That is something which which people are talking about in a green steel environment, and we are not there. Even 4.5, the levelized cost of green hydrogen, we are currently at 4.5 to $5 per kg, right? And there is still some time away on this pricing to touch to about 1.5 to $2 per kg. If that falls, certainly, we are at a break even. If let's say the green hydrogen is available at $1.5, certainly, the cost economics is at parity. There is actually there is no delta, there is no differential vis-a-vis conventional versus DRI-EAF route. But there is still some time away because the green hydrogen is capex heavy, electrolyzer capital cost has seen some decline, but they are still expensive. And more than that, it's a highly energy intensive operation. I mean, for 1 kg of hydrogen, you require at least 45 to 50 units of electricity. And around the clock renewable electricity is still above 5 rupees a unit. So it is still not cheap. So the green hydrogen cost economics is still not working fine in terms of the calculations as far as the green steel ecosystem is concerned. But if one were to combine with the revenues from the carbon credit, right? Certainly, the economics improves. I mean, the carbon credit, if we have to assume, let's say $50 to $70 per ton, to that extent, that delta will come down, right? So it has to be in sync with the implementation of the carbon credit pricing, but there is still some time away where the green steel viability has to be in place. So this was my last slide, to just think about it. And with that, let me conclude this session with the context setting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Girish Kadam. That sets the good backdrop for the discussions in this session. Now I invite Mr. Natarajan, Director Commercial, Steel Authority of India. A brief introduction about Mr. Natarajan. Mr. Natarajan joined SAIL in 1993 as management trainee. He possesses over 32 years of diversified experience across production, logistics, and sales. His career spans across multiple locations and functions, and broadly has exposure to manufacturing operations, marketing, and customer engagement. Natarajan has been instrumental in initiating a shift in sales marketing approach from commodity-based selling to solution-oriented engagement, including establishment of customer-centric service models. Let's welcome Mr. Natarajan with a round of applause, please.
Very good afternoon. I'm waiting for the presentation. Not coming here. Yeah. Not coming here. Okay, actually, some of the few initial slides, I think Mr. Kadam has already taken. But what is the thing? Actually, it's not coming in front, actually. Why India is now more, actually, you see, we are the second largest producer and we are also the second largest consumer. So the entire world is trying to capture this market, and as Indian consumers are also trying for most of the imports. And the government is of the view that why Indian steel industry should grow. Because we are going to have a steel consumption of around 230 million ton in the year 2030. And for that, we need to create a capacity of around 300 million ton. And going from 220 million ton to 300 million ton requires lot of capital. That is what our friend from ICRA told. And for having that, we need to have a better debt equity ratio. So for that, over with the consumers, I want you to support Indian Steel first. So India at the present is having 220 million ton capacity that all of you may be knowing. And last year we consumed 164 million ton. And this is going to go up by 9.2% in the current year. And what has happened with SAIL in the last year? First time we have crossed 20 million ton, and we are increased our exports also. So, and what we are expecting is this 9.2% growth, because I am just rushing through because this has been covered by our friend from ICRA. Yeah, what we are going to do by 2030? Steel Authority of India Limited will be going from 20 million ton. That is what we sold last year, from 20 million ton to 35 million ton by 2030-31. And this we are targeting by going in for capex of 1 lakh crore. And we have already finalized tenders for installation of a 4.5 million ton plant in Burnpur, West Bengal. And projects are already under tender stage for Bhilai and Bokaro. And one more expansion package will be coming in Rourkela. So for all this thing to consume, what ICRA and all metal junction, everybody is trying is that we need to increase the per capita consumption of steel. For the first time in the last year, we have crossed 100 kg per head actually. So, and that is very small when you see a grown-up countries, developed countries, where 600 kg per head is the per capita is the norm. So for that, actually, we need to, when you see most of our projects, infrastructure projects are taking a lot of time. Instead of completing in, we may be projecting to complete in 3 years, but it will be going for 5 to 6 years. Because there is a lack of, there is a impediments in implementation of RCC-based structures in dense urban cities. So in that place, if we go adopt steel-based construction, definitely this will fasten the thing. And also the life cycle cost. Most of the cost, what we are seeing in our initial project cost, always we will be seeing the actual cost, what is happening, instead of going on for the life cycle cost. We have seen the entire city of Mumbai is under redevelopment now. The buildings which were constructed in the year 1980s to 90s, all are being demolished and again being constructed. But this shows the limitation of RCC in coastal areas. Definitely there is a thought process for us to go in for thinking on life cycle cost while processing our estimates, while processing our design proposals, while giving approvals for infrastructure projects. For that, and it also needs a lot of ecosystem. And our civil engineering students, they study only RCC only in their subjects. So this also needs to go, because you won't be seeing a qualified steel structural fabricators, designers, and also the skill developed for installing that particular thing in the project. So for bringing that, actually once we are developing capacities, steel capacities, but there is a need to increase the capability of our labor force and also designer. The entire ecosystem has to come. And this is not that as a steel person I am telling, because I am in Steel Authority of India Limited, that is why I am promoting steel. But this is the way countries have progressed in the West. As though it is a program for steel industry, but I am just taking some content for discussing on Steel Authority of India Limited. But you see, as a company, we more focused, actually what we have done is that we were selling like billets, HR coil, but you see the margin, the value is never at the raw material stage. The margin increases once you move up the value chain of the customer. So if you sell a product as a simple HR coil, it has a value. If it be cut and given in a platform, it is having a value. If it is fabricated into a channel and given as a long member to a automobile customer, it is having another value. Where you see when this material moves from place to place, there is a logistic cost. In India, even for now today, there is a the landed price of a TMT bar in Delhi is 50,000 rupees. You take it from me, it will be around 6 to 7,000 rupees of raw material, that is logistic cost is involved, either in the raw material or in the finished product. So that is a huge amount. So these things where we can bring value, if these are planned in such a way that if the steel producers not only say, if we, because this is a leakage, entire leakage, and this is the value which is getting lost. If it is planned in such a way that if we give the material in a solution-based mindset, actually instead of selling the in an intermediate stage, if we give, even nowadays you see in Swiggy, you get an option for sambar ke liye vegetables, sambar ke liye ek rahega, and for some other kurma ke liye alag rahega. That is how they are packaging the vegetables in cuts and diced and then giving it to you. So in the same way, either in the TMT bars or HR coils, and those are the way actually is, I'm not saying something new. It is happened in the West that we need to adopt very fast. So SAIL will be concentrating more and more on downstream rather than doing, now we were, say last year we might have sold around 1 million ton of semis. So those things we will be moving away from that, and it will be bringing value to our customers. From end user experiences, so what is customer wants actually? So customer wants a assured supply and a delivery reliability. For that now, when you go in a e-commerce platform, when you order something, so you know there it will be given within 4 days it will be coming. So there you will be getting in 2 days. So my friend from Tata Project is already nodding actually. So in 4 days it will be there so that they can plan. But still as a product, when you move from commodity to a solution-based thing, you need certain time, lead time. Because if it is a commodity, it can be kept very near to that. In Faridabad, Ghaziabad, you can give it to immediately. But if it is a solution like a bar binding schedule is given, then you need to give a reasonable period of 20 to 30 days to supply. And normally EPC contractors will definitely agree that price predictability should be there, because in our India, you see during the monsoon, only 10% of the supply, 10% of the consumption goes down in construction. But it brings a very big change in the price of the end product. From around 20% to 25% price crashes. Thereafter, when 10% demand increases, then the price again goes in the reverse way. So this is something will be very difficult for EPC companies. There, they will be, whether we need to have an index linked or long tenure, that is something industry has to bring in the near future. And sustainability, that was covered actually, that is going to be one major factor in finalizing your orders, what is going to be your scope 1 emission, scope 2 emission, all those things will be considered. Nowadays, you are only bringing, this is technical evaluation, second is a commercial evaluation, and you used to give a comparative chart to your procurement managers. Then now they have to have this one also, what is going to be the green comparison. So, and consistent quality, this is something we cannot only rely on, we cannot restrict ourselves to BS quality, because each customer may be having a different application. Somebody must be having a 60-degree bending, somebody might be having 90-degree bending. Each will be requiring a different set of chemical or mechanical properties, technical delivery condition, which needs to be agreed upon. So this kind of customization will be important, and that is going to be the order of the day. And technical after sales, it is not like now in nowadays you see a chatbot. If you have some problem, you have to either it is in your telephone connection or anybody. It will be very difficult for you to chase to and get a human for answering your complaint. But in steel, it is not like that. You will be always having. But this not as from a commercial perspective, but a technical person who should be able to come to your point and then resolve. So that is what the end customer is expecting. And digitization is something that is what that assured supply and delivery reliability should be available like a e-commerce, what you are getting that feel. So these are the grades where we are prioritizing, and also most of our other fellow manufacturers also prioritizing. This is advanced high strength steels and corrosion wear resistant steels, electrical steels, API grade. These are the steels which are getting imported, and as the clarion call of our Honorable Prime Minister, that Atmanirbhar ke liye, we need, and we are also working in this, and these are the product segments where sale is expanding. And whatever we produce, you are going to consume there, but we need a resilient supply chain. Earlier, we were having a supply contract where we used to say that we does not guarantee any volume of business. But that will not be the thing actually. You need to give what is the, because if somebody is coming, there also I need to have a long-term tie-up with logistic partners. And logistic, as I told, it is taking more than 10 to 14% of our landed cost. So there is a long way we need to improve this. It is not only rail, it cannot be only by road. In most of the places we need to adopt rail plus road. And with dedicated freight corridor, actually one more route is coming from east to west. And this rail multimodal connectivity will become a norm. And joint demand forecasting, now we have started in Steel Authority, because now it is not only my demand. Normally we predict based on that. Now we will be, some of our key account customers are giving what is going to be their demand for the next 3 months. Okay. So this is something we need as an industry, we need to adopt so that we produce what is required by the market. Because inventory will kill everybody, not only you, it kills us also. So we need to have this, this is a culture, it has to come. So these are the few thoughts I brought near to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Natarajan, for giving an overview in terms of what sales plans are, in terms of transforming from a product company into a sales or services and solutions-oriented company. And also, he talked about various innovations which are happening at SAIL to bridge the gap in the market. With that, we'll move to steel consumer. We'll invite a major steel consumer, one of the possibly the largest steel consumers in India. We have from Tata Projects, Mr. Neeraj Agarwal. A quick intro about Mr. Neeraj Agarwal. He's the Chief Operating Officer at Tata Projects. He oversees core business functions, including project controls, procurement, IT, digitalization, safety, and quality assurance. He has over 3 decades of experience in EPC industry. He has worked across many landmark projects, including Noida International Airport. Further, he's also credited with critical manufacturing turnarounds within Tata ecosystem. He was involved in modernizing and expanding advanced fabrication facilities at Nagpur. Mr. Agarwal, we've heard from the steel manufacturer. We would like to hear from you as a steel consumer. What are your expectations from them? Beyond price, what is increasingly influencing your decision in terms of supplier selection as well as long-term partnerships? If we can hear about that, and also talk about bit in terms of the gap you still see between what suppliers are offering and as a consumer, you know, what is still the gap which is there and what more needs to be done to bridge the gap.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to express my views on this important subject. I hope I am audible. Yeah, so as a steel consumer, I think I'll be very candid. There are many challenges which are still there in our country. Predictability, and I'm very happy that SAIL, Mr. Mr. Natarajan actually elaborated many of our pain points in his presentation. And if a manufacturer is looking at those things, it is quite reassuring that there is a possibility of change. See, the biggest challenge what we find is the availability of steel, what we need. The sections what we need, and I'll be talking more not for the automobile or a white good industry because I'm from the EPC industry, will speak for the EPC industry. If I need to finish a particular structure or a particular substructure, and I need 30 different components to finish that up, assembling those 30 components in my factory itself is a challenge. Getting them in the right time, it's a challenge. Mill will make it as per their own production plan. I may get 26 and not all 28 or 30, and then I'm waiting. So that's one of the biggest challenge at the moment. Stockists are not there. The materials are not stocked. Every time, or I must say most of the time, the material is made to order. It is not available that I go and buy the material, especially the sections and the heavy thickness plates. The multiple grades which has come up in the design, good old days it used to be only 250 grade steel, but now you have multiple grades of steels. Every time a designer chooses to select a particular grade and then you have to go to the market to buy it. Lead time from design to start of fabrication of structural sections in our factories, be it directly owned by Tatas or with our partners who are actually in the fabrication, it is no less than 60 days or sometimes even more. And that's something which is quite detrimental to the schedules and all those things which are there. You invest the money because steel you buy by actually paying the money upfront, and you are waiting to have the meaningful fabrication. If you miss a particular section, just imagine the shop floor, which if it starts manufacturing, they are waiting for a particular component, then the shop floor is occupied. So availability is still a challenge while we are the second largest producer and the second largest consumer. But we feel that there is a very large gap in the say-do ratio as far as the supply is concerned. Another challenge when we are going out for exports and we want to export certain things. While we can export the plates and standard products, but if you are exporting the fabricated structures, we are still not manufacturing the range which is needed by the West. We are still manufacturing a range which is very limited. Technically, there is only one supplier who can supply us the steel. There is no one else who is supplying that. And that too in a very limited range of sections which are available in the country. So our exports becomes highly, highly inefficient. And then you start looking in terms of alternate designs, replacement of a section by a plate fabricated section, which makes your product or the offering which you are giving it to the industry outside India quite unattractive, because if you have to go back to the drawing board again because sections are not available, that becomes a huge challenge. Price predictability, I'm not saying that you give me a price for next 6 months, but the way we see it happening is, and my colleague is sitting over here who is actually buying the steel for us, around 28th of the month or 25th of the month, he says, अगले महीने आइएगा, इस महीने तो close हो गया. Order भी place नहीं हो सकता, क्योंकि rate ही पता नहीं है कि किस rate पे order place करना है. So this is the real challenge. Like, you have to time your ordering based on how the steel mills wants to receive the order. They are not ready to receive the order round the clock. They want order has to come because अगले महीने का जब price आएगा तभी order लेंगे. That's not healthy for us when we are actually going to the market and we want to buy it. We are not working 25 days in a month. We are working all the days in a month, and that's a big challenge what we face. And the demand is going to grow. Steel is going to grow much faster, and Mr. Natarajan talked about the speed and other things. So I think if we are to meet the demand, because concrete will go down, steel will go up. This is my view, and this is what we see as a trend, The steel availability, and especially from a section perspective, is something which is very, very critical. I hope I answered all your questions. If I missed,
This one is working. This is working.
Thank you for your candid points which you made. Mr. Soni, would you like to respond to some of those? I think that will be an interesting conversation rather than
Yes.
going through some presentation.
Yeah, no, good afternoon, everybody.
Before you start, sir, let me quickly introduce you. Yeah, let me quickly bring Mr. Soni into the conversation. Mr. Sanchit Soni is the Vice President and Head of Carbon Steel Business at Jindal Ferrous Limited, a new company which he will possibly talk about and introduce us to. Sanchit Soni is the Vice President, as I said. Jindal Ferrous has come up with a modern integrated manufacturing complex at Jajpur, Odisha, and he is based out of there. He has served in his past roles at SAIL in several verticals. His current assignment involves him, he's doing multiple roles. I mean, he's into procurement, he's into costing, he's into sales and marketing, and he also oversees the plant operations. His current focus is to drive JFL's growth and success in the steel market. So over to you to respond to the questions Mr. Agarwal had raised.
Yeah, so thank you so much. You already introduced my new, I would say, a baby, a startup in the steel industry, a small speck in the huge industry in India, almost 160 million tons. So we are a small part of it, but growing. And so we had very interesting presentation from Mr. Kadam and Mr. Natarajan as well. They have covered most of the points which, I'm sure all of us had these points in our mind which we wanted to talk about. So the perspective has been set. And Mr. Agarwal has also, set the tone. Having been associated with this industry for so many years, I could relate to what he has been saying. These are the things which, as a sales and marketing guy, I have been listening over the years. And I'm sure there have been improvements over the years, but yet, as is evident, there are some pain points still in the consumer's minds. So one point which he said was, I was in fact smiling, that 25 तारीख के बाद बोलते हैं कि अभी order नहीं लेंगे, अगले महीने लेंगे. So I think, sir, this concept, maybe it was there earlier, but now it is changing. I can assure you that on behalf of the steel fraternity, I can tell you that. Everybody wants orders in advance, all 365 days of the year, as you want steel all 365 days of the year. So this concept is changing slowly and slowly. In fact, for a small company like me, I want a 3 MRP plan. I want that my orders should be in place for the next whole quarter. Why only the next month? So that it helps me in better production planning, better demand forecasting, and at the same time, it helps the buyer, to optimize his purchases, buying the right material at the right time, keeping the minimum of inventory at your premises. So I'm sure all the steel makers are mindful of this requirement of the consumer, and things are improving, I'm sure, and going forward, they are going to be on a better scale. And also big steel makers like SAIL, JSW, JSPL, they have a lot of warehouses all across the country. This helps the industry to, cater to the last mile connectivity, to cater to the last minute needs of consumers like you, wherein you have 28 sections available, but 2 sections are not there. But again, to keep that section in the inventory, we need a kind of assurance from the steel consumer that yes, this material will be lifted. It will not keep on lying in stock because everybody is, mindful of the inventory carrying costs as well. So it involves more coordination with a large consumer like Tata Projects, like L&T, like so many others. So things, as I said, things are improving, but maybe we need to jointly work on it more so that these things, they should not be in the picture at all. Then, secondly, you mentioned about okay, the price not being a factor, but I think somebody else mentioned about it. But I believe that when we are talking of a continuity of business, then the transparency of price on both sides, on the consumer side as well as the steel maker side, is very important for the financial health of both sides. Yes, agreed, there is seasonality of business. During the monsoons, there is a dip in pricing, dip in demand. But as we were talking, Mr. Agarwal, just before the session began, you said the demand is huge and it is just growing. Everybody here would agree that today 8% number would very soon be back in double digits as it was post-COVID. We were at 11%, I believe, and then, okay, we have come down a bit. But I'm very confident that the growth in steel in India is going to be back to double digits very soon. So India is a bright spot in the entire global steel fraternity. So when there is a predictability in demand, when there is an assured demand, what will follow is a predictability in pricing as well. Yes, it will go along as per the market, as per the seasonality, but then, as I said, assured business with assured pricing, assured availability will help the overall industry ecosystem. And lastly, I'm speaking on your behalf, sir, the services of the steelmaker matter a lot. I always tell my team, a lot of investment has been made into production, a lot of investment has been made into in the steel plant as such. But as a sales and marketing guy, what matters most, because you are the face of the company, what matters most is the service part. So this aspect, I'm sure, like in some other industries, the level is at a higher level. Steel fraternity is definitely working on it, and I know for sure that it has improved. But there are some of the things which, like faster complaint resolution, that is one thing, and maybe some technical supports, some more R&D in our working, which will help in serving the customer better. So these are then customized products is another. These are some of the things which steel plants, we as a steel fraternity have to work upon more. And going forward, I'm sure there will be a better understanding between the consumer, between the end user and the steel maker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soni. Just to take the discussion forward, just one more question. What are your thoughts on high-strength steel and value-added steel, which was spoken about by Mr. Natarajan?
Yes.
How can they improve the project economics in terms of, we heard in the morning that we want to complete projects at a faster pace. There's some target set in some of the projects in India.
Yes. See,
so how can this help, if you can
India is such a big steel capacity now of 160 million ton with an installed capacity of 220 million tons and growing. But still, if you see, in the first quarter this year, India was a net importer of steel, despite so many safeguard measures in place. Still, we are importing. So what are we importing? Most of the steel, I would say 70 to 80% of the steel what we are importing is value-added steel. The high-strength grades, the API grades. When you look at a car, you look at a Maruti Suzuki, the outside would be Indian steel, maybe Tata Steel or JSW, the body. But if you open the bonnet, the inside, it's still all imported steel. The high-strength steels, the 650 grades, the 750 grades, which in some small quantities we are making, but still it's a long way to go. As I said earlier, a lot of effort, lot of R&D has to be done. For a small, I'll speak for myself. For a small, my capacity is only 2 million tons to start with. So we are still in the phase of ramping up. But our focus, since the volumes are not great, going forward, once we ramp up in another 6 to 8 months' time, our focus, and that is the overall, even the management point of view, that is the focus. We want to focus on value-added steel. So for that, we are putting up a lot of good equipment, all European equipment, and side by side, we are working on the R&D part of it. We have got some industry experts with us. So for a small company like us, we are working on it, and I am sure big steel behemoths like SAIL, JSW, JSPL, everybody is working on it, and slowly, the portfolio of value-added steel will grow in the steel companies, and I hope the reliance on imported steel for India, it goes down with time.
With that conversation, we'll go to the next speaker. I'll invite Mr. Rajiv Maitra from Deloitte. So we heard from the customers, we heard from the steel manufacturers. So let's hear from a strategy perspective in terms of what can be done to bridge the demand-supply gap. A quick introduction about Mr. Rajiv Maitra. He's an executive advisor and a leader with 23 years of experience in strategy and transformational programs in mining and metal sector. He's a partner and metals and mining sector leader at Deloitte South Asia. He has led over 125 engagements for industrial, mining, and metal clients in this region. So he has worked with both global and regional players across the value chain in geographies such as Australia, India, Europe, Southeast Asia. He is also playing a leading role in initiatives related to critical minerals, digitalization, and ESG in his current organization across these geographies. Let's welcome Mr. Rajiv Maitra, please.
So very good afternoon to all of you, dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, delegates. Thank you for inviting me in this session. And of course, we had wonderful speakers talking about the trends and important elements of the topic. So maybe I'll just give a quick overview in terms of where do we stand, and this is known to all of us. So this year we had consumption of the domestic steel demand of 164 million tons. Under various projections, we are seeing this by FY30, we are going to be anywhere between 205 to 225 million. And FY36, the projection is around 275 to 322 million. So we are at a growth path. And of course, this has been kind of driven by the population growth, the urbanization, which today we are lower than probably some of the other advanced nations. We are projecting urbanization to almost 40-odd%. Robust GDP growth and investments. And of course, there is a shift from semis to finished steel. I think Mr. Natarajan mentioned that today when we look at some of the largest steel players, their share of semis out of total steel, sellable steel is to the tune of 10, 12, 20, 15%. Previously it was almost 20, 25. So it is coming down. But more importantly, in terms of, if I look at from a broader demand growth, infrastructure remains one of the largest demand pool. And it will, of course, this will continue going forward. But we feel that there is a higher headroom for structural steel adoption. So when we talk of infrastructure, this is railways, metro, road bridges, irrigation, water supply, and airports, and so on and so forth. So 47, almost 50 million tons of 164 million ton consumption is in the infrastructure sector. And when we look at in terms of share of steel frame construction, steel to concrete ratio, we are far lower than some of the advanced nations. So for example, if I look at steel frame construction, we are 10%. Japan is 40%, US is 60%. Steel to concrete ratio, which is a key KPI, we are 0.35. Japan is 1.84. So when we look at all these KPIs from a steel sector point of view, the growth that we are looking at is 2.5x. It's easily doable when we look at and focus more on structural steel instead of cement concrete. Why do we need structural steel? Because it is 60% lighter and concrete and stronger. 20 to 30% lesser construction time. This was mentioned by Mr. Natarajan in his speech as well. The total life cycle cost, which is very important, it is at least 5 to 7% lower in terms of TCO and 40% more sustainable construction. And of course, to enable this, we need building code modification. We need aspects like fabrication at site. We need more adoption and knowledge sharing with some of the construction players. And what we believe is some of the key segments which have high potential is PEBs, pre-engineered buildings, renewable infrastructure, industrial warehouses, and data centers. And when we go ahead and look at a broader spectrum of demand, so one of the areas what we are looking at is rural. So today, when we are looking at our steel per capita consumption, we are almost 106, 110 kgs. Globally, some of the other, China and US, they're much higher. But rural in India, the per capita consumption is around 25 to 30 kg. So there are a lot of opportunities in rural, like food processing and storage, grain silos, cold storage, and if I look at dairy, animal husbandry, the shade shelters, dairy machinery, rural development, infrastructure, housing, and of course agriculture and farming in terms of farm equipment. And there we need products which probably today we are using lesser in quantity. And some of the emerging applications as we are seeing in steel, be it in residential, high-rise buildings, advanced high-strength structural steel, lightweight steel. We are looking at corrosion-resistant steel in infrastructure requirement, capital goods, wind turbines, solar panels, data centers where we need high-strength and lightweight steel, and of course, automotive. So there are many grades which are required going forward, and these are opportunities for the steel players and the industry to tap in. Now, when we look at procurement, how is steel procurement changing from previous terms? So the previous speakers mentioned that previously the steel procurement primarily led to price-led buying. Now we are looking at value-based sourcing based on great customization, performance, reliability, and sustainability. So when we look at some of the buying that is happening, and especially for certain categories and certain end users, weight optimization, especially for automotive, and structural flexibility and integrity are very important, especially for high-strength steel applications. Faster project execution erections. This is a requirement where all the end users, they are looking at, can we have pre-engineered buildings, for example, infrastructure that can play a part. Plug and play and prefabricated structures. Again, infrastructure is important. Sustainability in terms of green certificates. This is required especially for multinationals and wherever there is investment by global players. For example, in a data center, green certificate is probably going to be mandate, ESG-led, I would say, for instruction. Corrosion resistance, quality, safety, end-of-life value, and of course, looking at total cost of ownership, lower total cost of ownership. And last is, of course, not the least, customization. Customization in terms of not only grades, but also customization at site. Can we have local fabricators who can tie up with the steel players to produce cut to length, produce specific sizes and lengths, and as well as shapes. So that's going to be very important going forward. And last is, of course, when we look at some of the strategies for, in terms of steel, commercial strategies for steel players. So there are 4 segments. We have looked at the Ansoff matrix, which is basically talking about volume on one hand and margin, and the second is customers and newer customer segments. So when we look at areas like improving price mix in terms of existing counts, product co-development, This is a phenomena that people are doing globally. For example, Nippon Steel and Mazda, they jointly developed 1800 MTPA steel sheet via hot pressing. Then people are looking at circular supply chain. For example, Volvo Cars and Shougang and Zhejiang, they have all kind of collaborated to develop a closed loop steel recycling system. So this is something that we can look at from India perspective, how the collaboration between not only the steel producers but the end users, I think that was mentioned previously, is important. Then we look at sustainability in terms of sustainable steel structures, value sharing on cost savings, looking at solution-led offerings like ArcelorMittal. They have done a smart steel solution, having lightweight design blueprint and engineering studies. And last is, of course, joint bidding. This is important because we have also an EPC contractor. For example, some of the players in Germany, the EPC contractor and the green steel producing mills have active collaboration and alliance for even bidding. So these are some of the areas we thought that are important from a commercial strategy, future-led commercial strategy, which will be primarily driven by collaboration, is a big theme, customization, and of course, partnerships and strategic resilience. So we just had these 5 slides to talk about so that it kind of throws newer light to the topic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rajiv. That gives a perspective. Collaboration is the word which you used. I think such sessions help a bit in terms of bringing about the collaboration. So that was the purpose of the session. I know some of the panelists are under time pressure to leave. Before we conclude the session, can we have 1 or 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll close the session. Okay. Okay. It's a post-lunch session. Okay. No, I'm not. We'll bring the session to a close. Thank you all for joining us for the 3rd session. Thanks. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Senthilnathan. So with this, we come to an end of this very interesting session. Thank you to the moderator and to all the panelists. The discussion highlighted how stronger collaborations between steel producers and end users can drive sustainable demand growth. I would now request Mr. K. Senthilnathan to hand over a token of appreciation to each of the panelists here today who have made small little contributions. Can we have the token of appreciation, please? And also for a group photograph. One by one. Can we have a round of applause, please, from the audience? Thank you. so much once again. Request for a group photograph, please. Thank you so much. Now let's move to session 4. Ladies and gentlemen, this session talks about scrap generation and recycling. And it focuses on one of the fastest evolving segments of India's steel ecosystem, steel recycling. As India moves towards greater resource efficiency and lower carbon emissions, recycling will become the increasingly critical in securing raw materials while reducing environmental impact. Today's discussion will cover domestic scrap availability, automotive and infrastructure scrap generation, recycling ecosystem, and decarbonization initiatives in the steel industry. I will now invite each of the speakers for this session to come onto the stage, please. Mr. Rahul Gupta, Chief Steel Recycling Business, Tata Steel Limited. Let me introduce Mr. Rahul Gupta. As Chief of Steel Recycling Business, Mr. Rahul manages the scrap procurement for Tata Steel India and the business operations of the company's first steel recycling facility at Rohtak in Haryana. This business is expected to significantly grow in next 2 to 3 years as the group sets up similar such steel recycling facilities across India. A BE in Metallurgical and Materials Engineering from Bengal Engineering College, Mr. Gupta joined Tata Steel as management trainee in 2007. He was part of the core team which went to Bhushan Steel post-acquisition by Tata Steel and then was deputed and entrusted upon handling distribution and branded products business at Tata Steel BSL. A warm welcome to Mr. Gupta. Next in line is Mr. Abhigyan Kotnala, Chief Executive Officer, Fort Gloucester Industries Limited. May I please request Mr. Abhigyan to come onto the stage, please? Let me also introduce Mr. Abhigyan. He's the CEO of Fort Gloucester Industries Limited, brings nearly 2 decades of leadership experience in business strategy, sales, operations, and market development. Having held senior leadership positions with organizations such as Polycab, Johnson Controls, Honeywell, and Sodexo, he has successfully driven business transformation and sustainable growth across India's industrial and infrastructure sectors. Known for his strategic vision and customer-centric leadership, he is passionate about advancing innovation, operational excellence, and the future of the power and cable industry. At industry forums, he shares practical insights on leadership, market trends, and building resilient, future-ready organizations. A very warm welcome to the conference. Our next speaker is Mr. Ritesh Maheshwari, Director, Materials Recycling Association of India. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Maheshwari, please? He's a leader in global trade operations across ferrous scrap, stainless steel scrap, nickel alloys, aluminum and other non-ferrous metals. With over a decade of experience in the metal scrap and iron and steel industry, he has built extensive expertise in international trade, supply chain management, and developing a long-term strategic partnerships. A graduate of Lal Bahadur Shastri Institute of Management, Mr. Ritesh is passionate about the steel and recycling industry and is committed to create sustainable value for customers and business partners worldwide. Having traveled extensively across global markets, he brings a strong international perspective and deep understanding of evolving industry trends. Again, a very warm welcome. We have another speaker who would be joining virtually with us is Mr. Abhishek Bhadra, General Manager, Sales and Marketing, Long Products, Danieli India. A mechanical engineer by education and a patent holder, Mr. Abhishek holds the position of General Manager, Technical Sales, responsible for marketing and business development for law product plants in SAARC countries. With over 19 years of professional experience, he has worked for versatile organizations like Microsoft, Helmerich Advanced Tech USA, Tata Consulting Engineers, SMS Group before joining Danieli Group. I hope he has joined virtually. Can anybody from the console confirm, please? To moderate the session with such eminent panelists in session number 4, I would like to now invite Mr. Aviral Chandra, Director, Minings and Metal, KPMG in India. Can we have a round of applause for Mr. Aviral, please? A short introduction about Aviral. He's a mechanical engineer and MBA by education. He currently serves as a director with KPMG's consulting vertical focusing on the metals and mining segment. He has over 15 years of experience helping companies across areas of growth, diversification, EBITDA and digital transformation, policy design, organization capability buildup, and critical minerals in recent years. Aviral brings with him blend of experience across industry, startups, and consulting. A very warm welcome, Mr. Aviral. So with this, the floor is open to you. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I'll start with a very quick presentation to set the tone. Some critical questions that I'd like the panelists to ponder upon. And maybe by the end of the session, we'll have few answers and go enriched from this session. So a very quick overview of the demand-supply situation in this steel recycling and scrap market. And then we'll move over to the decarbonization status of India. Have those questions on board and then get into the discussion. So a very quick overview of the demand side situation of the scrap market. We believe that it's set to grow over 1.5 times in the next 5 years from a current demand of somewhere around 40 million ton to 60 million tons, driven by the decarbonization push, the 2047 vision that the government of India has set in place. Also, supply chain diversification to reduce demand on imported raw materials, particularly coke, and then some advantages that this has in terms of lower energy and water consumption. And while the demand increases, I think the supply side remains constrained. So the deficit today, which is to the tune of 10 million ton, is set to increase to 15 million ton, which further translates into increasing import dependency. So it's imperative that there are aspects that are being undertaken to address the supply-demand gap. While this import dependency increases, there are certain restrictions that are being placed by countries who have been our traditional exporters. So tariffs, EU countries restricting export of these raw materials, trying to utilize them in-house, as well as easing Chinese policy so that they can get in lower cost scrap material. Now, in terms of push that is being undertaken by government and industry participants alike, there have been a number of policy steps that have been taken. So whether it's the green steels taxonomy that has been put in place, the scrap recycling policy, vehicle scrappage policy. But the impact of all these steps remains to be seen. That's been our analysis, at least. On the industry front, there have been a number of dedicated recycling plants, not of very high capacity, but of limited medium to small scale capacity. Uh, Increasing scrap mix that is being tried to being utilized by the manufacturers, as well as advanced scrap techniques, which the company is looking out for. I don't think we have the answers today, and that's something that we'll discuss with our panel today. I think when we look at this entire value chain from the lens of people, the capabilities that we have in-house within India from a process point of view, technology and capital, we do see a number of bottlenecks across the generation, collection, processing, and the consumption value chain. Having said that, I just wanted to highlight top three here because a number of steps are being undertaken to solve for these problems, whether it's industry or by the government. But three remain prominent. I think the first one is how the formalization of the existing scrap ecosystem, which is on the collection side, evolves over a period of time. Second is how does the technology evolution aid the industry? I think that's one area we lag behind big time when we look at our peers, whether it's Chinese or EU recyclers. And then on the consumption side, the business case itself, whether that supports the scale up that's required, because the decarbonization goals are very, very stringent when we look at some of these scenarios. So would the scale be available and the economics be there to support that? These are again questions we'll put to the forum today and try and get answers to. I think just moving on, when we look at the decarbonization push and how the intrinsic demand for green steel is. So one good step is the green steel taxonomy that has been put in place. Now aligning to that policy, as we see through our analysis of various end consuming segments, particularly the export market, automotive sector, building and construction, we see that the FY30 numbers look to be somewhere around 10 million ton, and FY35 numbers close to 20 million ton, which is 4 to 5x of the current numbers. But this is the intrinsic demand. On the supply side, with the existing definitions, we are actually much more on the higher side on the supply side. So we need to essentially find outlets and markets for the capacity that's getting built up. And just one last question again for the panel that comes out through our analysis. When we look across the large steel producers as well as the SSIs, the secondary steel market, I think the large steel producers do have their plans in place. They do have a pathway and a roadmap in place. But where the bottleneck looks more prominent is the SSIs. How does the translation of the knowledge and the understanding of potential steps that can be undertaken actually gets accounted for in their everyday working mechanism? So when we look at the SSI capacity, the current baseline is somewhere around 2.8 tons of CO2 at a TFS level. And with our analysis, when we look at the unit level interventions, when we look at the different cluster level interventions, this number doesn't look like coming below 2.2, which is the threshold for green steel taxonomy. So I think another question back to the team would be how and what kind of steps can be undertaken by these SSIs, and what kind of technology solutions are available in the market to address this problem? How do they go beyond 2.2 and become a green steel offerer? So with this, I think we'll go back to the team and start posing these questions. So my first question would be to Rahul, and Rahul comes with significant experience having looked at the journey of setting up the recycling ecosystem in Rohtak and the recent EAF which has come online. Rahul, what we would like to understand from you is, in this experience and in this journey that you have seen, what have been the key learnings, the top 2, 3 learnings for you? What were these bottlenecks that you came across? And hence, what were the pathways that you undertook to navigate those challenges?
So, firstly, thanks, Aviral, for the questions. So, I would, since it's almost now 5, 6 years when we started this journey, I'll like to go back when we were, say, surveying the market to set up a scrap business, right? We realized that to put up a EF, when we studied some of the global models which are prevailing in US, Europe, or in Western part where scrap is surplus, that securitization of raw material is the most important thing before you get into a scrap-based or an EF steel making. Hence, the first navigation, if you have to ask me, was to move away from a conventional procurement than any steel company would do, right? To set up a dedicated team to look at a scrap market, okay? Which is in India, say 6, 7 years back, there were hardly any policies. We had outdated policies of 60s. It was highly fragmented, unorganized, trust deficit, opaque, if I have to call it, to a large extent. Okay, so to set up a business as steel recycling business for a large steel company as Tata Steel was the first step or the first challenge to navigate to do it. Right? Now, if I have to come in the next step, which is say post-COVID, what we did was also to look at how do you then formalize this supply chain or work with the ecosystem as was being discussed in the first session in the morning. How do you have a full ecosystem that supports you to say, quote unquote, get these kabadiwalas to a formal sector? Our team had to go around in nooks and corners of the cities to get them registered as an authorized GST guy, to help them, educate them on the specs, and also parallelly learn, because we were also new. So it was more of a learning than education for I would say, navigating the challenge. And then also to work parallelly with, say, other stakeholders, which may be government, which may be MRAI, which may be other consumers of scrap, to say, how do we develop this whole ecosystem together? So as you showed in one of your slides, that a lot of policies have come in the government. So we were also an active participant as a company to a lot of these policies. The last but not the least, as we now come towards starting of the EF, which is electric arc, which is the culmination of the scrap supply chain that we have set up as the first step. You don't look at EF as just another steel making facility for us. It is one of a major steps towards sustainable steel making, which will evolve circularization, not only scrap. It also has a lot of renewable energy as part of it, a lot of secondary metallurgy which is going ahead with this to set up this journey going ahead. Obviously, we'll test it as we go, but there is a business model differentiation which we want to create, which I'll come further on this. So I think largely these were the major challenges. Getting ourselves molded into that system, setting up that supply chain or formalizing that supply chain, where digital played a very important role, and bring in a lot of trust, transparency on the system.
No, fantastic. Nothing like living through that journey. But again, thanks for giving that outlook, and I'm sure the forum here would get insights and pick up few key pointers coming out of that. Moving on to Ritesh, and I think you bring a very different lens of representing a larger body of not just large recyclers, but representing the small and medium recyclers, and you can honestly bring those key aspects of what are those challenges that these recyclers have faced, and what is it that it would take for them to really scale up contributing to the scale aspirations that we have as a country?
Hello. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. So I think, first of all, for the general interest of public and the audience over here, I would like to formally introduce, I am Ritesh from MRAI, Material Recycling Association of India. So those of you who are new or who have not heard about us, MRAI is the apex association representing more than 2,000 recyclers, scrap producers, scrap importers, scrap traders, as well as the mills who are using scrap in India, in Asia, and we are now the apex body for coordinating anything and everything related to any type of scrap across the globe with a specialized focus on India. So we are partnering with all the leading global associations, basically turning the entire global supply chain of scrap as one big marketplace, where we are constantly the apex body for flow of information, ideas, industry updates, and latest trends across the geographies. So as all of us over here know, people from Tata Steel very well know, all the consumers, everyone knows, scrap is now a resource above the earth, above the land on the earth. So it's a resource waiting to be utilized. It's a resource which should be capitalized at all the costs for all the mills. Now, I'm very thankful to Government of India, our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi ji, and the entire cabinet, which has supported us wholeheartedly, especially in last 10 to 12 years, where recycling has come to the forefront. And thank God for companies like Tata Steel who have realized the importance of this recycling of the raw material for making better environmental friendly or green steel as we call it today. So everybody knows how important it is now, and slowly but steadily the entire industry is catching up with the norm. And I'm very pleased to share on today's platform over here that we have more than 2,500 members from very big companies to very, very small entrepreneurs. And when we have our annual conference once a year, which happens every year in January in India, we have more than 3,500 people coming only to learn and do something related to scrap. So I must say that the ecosystem is really buzzed up now. Existing players are looking to scale up. Rahulji, in last 3 years, I have not come across any recycler who has come back to me and told me we are scaling down. Nobody is interested to scale down. Everybody knows the potential of this business. Everybody knows I think at some point of time, they also know the kind of service to the humankind, service to the nation, which they are doing by participating in this industry. So there's a lot of self-respect also involved here. So we are growing. India, we all know the numbers, making about 165, 170 million tons of steel. We actually need to use about 80, 85 or 65, 70 million tons of scrap, but we are using close to 40 million tons of scrap on the numbers. Domestic generation and usability is about 32 million tons, and we are importing about 8 million tons. So as the existing players ramp up their production, first bottleneck which they are facing is the technology. To address these concerns, we are organizing a very interesting conference just 1 month from now in Japan. Japan, as we know, is one of the leading countries who have developed a lot of expertise and technologies to extract the last kg of this usable scrap which they can from any kind of materials. So on the technological front, we are very focused. We want our recyclers to come up, to deploy capital, to have the latest technologies in place. And that's why we are organizing this conference in Japan, in Tokyo, in end of August. And second, of course, as Rahulji says, that raw material security is the most important concern for a mill. So similarly for a recycler, again, the raw material security, which is ELV in our case, the cars to get into their system, to dismantle, to recycle. That is one of the major concerns. During the course of further discussions, I'll elaborate some points on that. But definitely the industry is good, industry is buzzing, industry is growing, and we are really looking forward for a good growth. Okay? Yeah.
So thanks, Ritesh, and interesting to note how your body and the members are coming together to collaborate, not just among themselves, but going outside borders and looking at benchmark countries like Japan. Fantastic to know that. Now, bringing in Abhigyan, you bring in the perspective of a very different industry, and I would acknowledge, in fact, that the copper industry is, in fact, one industry which has been on the forefront of utilizing every last piece of scrap that has been available, and it's down to historical supply side bottlenecks that we have had on the copper side. So I'll and the people here would be interested to know what have been some of the steps that the industry in general and your organization more specifically has taken in this perspective, and something that is there for the steel industry to also take away from things that have been done in the copper industry.
So, Viral, it's very important in terms of the scrap, which has been an integral part for any of the industry. And for the cable industry, it's one of the major factors. As you correctly said, we utilize maximum of the scraps. And the points which a steel industry has to adapt, I think already Ritesh and Rahul were saying that, and they are utilizing it and they are doing it. So that's the best part. But for in specifically into the cable industry, most of the things is when the cable scrap is being done, it is being segregated in a well-mannered way by the manufacturer itself only. And on that basis, all the recyclers or the second vendors who wants to take that scrap, they know it what type of scrap they have to take it up. So in generally unfortunate manner in terms of the steel industry, while that demolition of the house or something happens, so there is no segregation. But in the cable industry, the segregation is huge in terms of how the metal is being removed, how the compounding or the PVC or XLP, which has been the outer sheet of the cable, has been removed, and that's how it has been utilized actually. So wherever the metal is being utilized, say the copper or aluminum, so anyhow, copper is now the another gold from after the post-COVID. So it's been very sort of an organized sector right now in terms of how they are using it, how it has been utilized into the market, and that becomes a major change. Secondly, the involvement of the economic incentives is huge in that area, because in terms of the incentives, or you can say the cash flow is very high in that the material which has been scrapped out, and it is more of a decentralized. It's not into the tier 1 or specific areas only. It's on to the every place, tier 2, tier 3 cities. The scrap is being utilized, and a lot of people have been there who are utilizing it, and so that becomes a more of, you can say, you will find a metal traders more in terms of having those scrap becoming scrap dealers or something like that. So slowly and gradually, as Ritesh correctly said, they are making a platform, or Rahul said there is a platform. So sooner, I think these things will come into the steel industry. Obviously, that will become a more organized sector. As you would be aware that a few years back, cable industry was also not such an organized sector. Today, it's a sort of a very much organized sector. So things have been very aligned in such a manner. So transportation is another thing which has been very important, where we take the material from any of the manufacturers separately. But if we have to scrap these things, so there are the scrap dealers who have their own transportation. They know how to reduce the cost of this freight and everything. So that becomes an integral part for the steel industry also, how it can be utilized. So I think that becomes a bit of ease for us in terms of our industry when we talk about. Yes, I can understand there are a lot of challenges in terms of the steel part. So it would be more important how we can move forward more into digitization. That is the important thing, which is very critical right now into the market. And slowly and gradually, a lot of platforms are coming up. So hopefully we are, finger crossed, hopefully we will have those things more into the formal way.
Yeah, thanks for those inputs, Abhigyan. And a quick check, is Mr. Bhadra there online? Mishra, if you are there online, maybe you can confirm.
Mr. Bhadra, if you are online and if you can hear us, can you please confirm?
Yes. Good evening. Yes. Good evening. Yes. Good evening. Yes.
Abhishek, I hope you can hear us. I think I was very interested in hearing your perspectives from a technology point of view. In fact, Danieli is one company which has come out with technologies and solutions which just don't take care of the sustainability aspect, but at the same time bring in the cost benefit piece as well on the table, and hence the ability to get adoption in the market. Mr. Abhishek, I understand you'd like to present a few slides on what offerings you have for the steel industry. So over to you, sir.
Present now as well as share my views, or I share my views now and maybe present later? How do you want me to proceed for this?
So you're checking. No, so he can go ahead and present. Sir, you can put up your slides and maybe present.
Okay, sure. Am I audible properly?
Yes.
Okay, just confirm me whether you can see my screen.
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. Good evening to esteemed delegates from different sectors, the panelists. I'm going to touch upon the topic of MIDA, which goes very well on today's theme for this particular session. As well, it will create a very nice link with the topic of what Mr. Rahul Gupta started for the Ludhiana scrap-based mini mill plant is currently under, the hot test and PG parameters phase. So, MIDA is a very interesting topic which talks about the complete integrated solution from arc furnace, casting and the rolling. Now to set up a context of this plant, how MIDA started, I will not take much time on this. It started in the year of mid-90s when our ex-CEO Mr. Gian Pietro Benedetti, he was visiting a company called Commercial Metal Company in United States. And Mr. Rahul Gupta can easily correlate what I'm going to say for next 1 or 2 minutes with the concept of Rohtak steel processing facilities with this Ludhiana plant. So what the owner of Commercial Metal Company told Mr. Benedetti that what we have is very good quality scrap, automobile scrap. And what we have is an excellent market where we can sell the product. The entire radius of the scrap processing and the market is, let's say, 250 miles. What we don't have is a regional mini mill. But that cannot happen having a large footprint. That cannot have a very high emission. How can Danieli help? So there comes the concept of MIDA. What happens in conventional mini mill? You cast the billet, you put into the gas reheating furnace, and you roll. In MIDA, we remove the reheating furnace. There is absolutely no reheating furnace. The cast product is directly getting rolled. So by doing this, you save almost 350 kilowatt hour per ton of equivalent energy. The scope 1 carbon dioxide emission comes down at the level of 43 kg per ton. It gives you an yield savings of 3.5 to 4% on account of less scale and trimming from conventional process. And when we try to quantify quantify in terms of money the good effects of all these things I have just said a second before, it gives you almost 50 USD per ton of operational cost saving. So what are the concepts of media? Just have a look at the animation above. You are taking the cast and then it is getting rolled till the ladle gets empty for the steel making. So you have the concept of a very compact mini mill. You are promoting circular technology. It's a regional scrap recycling promoting technology. Last but not the least, you are producing and getting top quality commercial grade products, sellable products to the market. I will not go to very deep of the technology of this plant because it takes time. I think I have 15 minutes. What Mida has is a casting unit, a melting unit, and definitely a rolling unit. So starting from the raw material, which is scrap in this case, you get the finished product in less than 2 hours for a fine-tuned Mida plant. If I structure it unit-wise, you have Digimelter, which is a super efficient melting unit, electric arc furnace, ladle furnace. We have our patented solution of Octocaster. I will explain about it, what it is. And you have an energy-saving compact rolling mills. Digimelter is basically the electric arc furnace technology, which is the bread and butter of Mida technology. What you do, you preheat the scrap in this technology. Imagine a scenario where you are preheating the scrap, you are preheating the raw material, you are getting the energy out of it, and you are utilizing that energy to finally melt the steel. That means the energy that you are producing, you are utilizing that energy to melt. So it's a great promoter of circular economy, and not only that, you are basically adhering to the law of conservation of energy. The Digimelter can have a long preheater where you can preheat the scrap of different density. It is also advantageous from the point of view that you can deal with different density of scrap. What we know that scrap is a very volatile market. The price changes very frequently. And if the scrap prices increases, it becomes very difficult for the end user. But with the flexibility where you can play with different density of the scrap, just visualize from a point of view that you don't have to depend on the scrap quality, or in other words, you don't have to depend on the volatile market price of the scrap. Danieli Octocaster. In terms of casting, what we know typically a typical square input sizes. What Danieli introduced is an octagonal shaped cast product. Why octagon? Because the idea is to cast the casting product at a very high speed. And very high speed, by very high speed I mean the casting speed beyond 7 meters per minute. What we noticed that when you try to cast the square input sizes at a very high speed, you get bulging. That's an animation. That's an animation created by our R&D, the effect of bulging in an input square billet and the bulging of octagon. So we noticed that when you try to cast at very high speed, octagon provides you less bulging. Another thing what we noticed that round products or any input of square input is having less stability in comparison to octagons when you try to cast at very high speed. That is the reason Danieli patented this technology in 2017, and that has become an incredible part of Mida's process flow. Not only that, from the rolling mill point of view, octagon is a section close to round, more than square. So by using octagon, you provide lesser load and lesser jerk on the rolling mill stands. terms of rolling mill, you have different technologies. I will just touch upon. You have an induction heater because you are taking the cast directly to the rolling mill, and there is no reheating furnace. Over there, you are not only saving equipment, you are saving emission, you are saving natural gas, and you are also saving footprint of the plant in terms of billet yard. But you need to reheat the billet somehow, so you have an induction heater. You have very efficient rolling mill stands, and you have the associated facilities. Last but not the least, you have a very interesting technology. You have, as part of the MIDA, smaller cooling bed concept. Smaller cooling bed means in a conventional rolling mill, the cooling bed we are talking about 66 meter and above. But in MIDA, depending on the product mix, depending on the speed, depending on the percentage mix of smaller products, you can have a cooling bed of only 30 meter. That means the rolling mill footprint becomes much lesser. That means the balance of plant requirement becomes much lesser. That's an animation, small animation, how you are discharging the product into the rolling mill. Another amazing aspect of this technology is that you don't need cold cutting. The shear before the cooling bed cuts the commercial length directly. If the audience has rolling mill background people over there, you can imagine what I'm trying to talk about. I'm talking about equipment saving, and I'm talking about vastly costlier equipment saving. So these are the advantages that you can get as part of the MIDA technologies. In terms of finishing facilities, you can produce almost all the long products as part of the MIDA technology. You can produce commercial grade rebar. You can produce rebar in coil, which is also called spooler. And definitely you can produce wear rod up to high carbon. Why MIDA? Capex wise, this is a comparative we have done for a 350,000 tons per year of mini mill in European market. We have seen that in comparison to the conventional mini mill, on the technological side, you save almost 10% of the capex. On the auxiliary side, the comparative is also equivalent. Building, you save huge. Erection, you save considerable. And civil also, you save a lot of money. In terms of OPEX, you can see the figures are self-explanatory, but just to give you an idea, in terms of cold charge mini mill, cold charge means where there is the application of reheating furnace. MIDA technology can give you an OPEX savings of 50 euro per ton in comparison to a cold charge conventional mini mill. And that difference becomes 40 euro per ton when you compare MIDA versus hot charge. And by hot charge, what I mean? Hot charge means you are casting the billet from the caster, but you are cutting it into the commercial length and you are putting that billet into the rolling mill. In terms of energy, you can see the figures. For the cold charge mini mill, while the total mini mill gives you a kWh per ton of close to 1300, you can have 910, that is 900 kilowatt hour per ton for a MIDA plant. That is 30% saving. And when we talk about hybrid MIDA, what is hybrid MIDA? In MIDA, we have a technology called Q1. I did not explain about that. You can have a feed where you can run the electric arc furnace through any alternative source of energy. That means solar or wind or hydel. So that is called hybrid MIDA. The kWh per ton comes at the level of 800 kilowatt hour per ton. That means almost 38 to 40% savings in comparison to the cold charge mini mill. Scope 1 carbon dioxide emission, you can have an aspect 200 kg of carbon dioxide per ton of finished steel versus 43 kg per ton of carbon dioxide emission per ton of finished steel. And this is also very much less if you compare a conventional blast furnace, basic oxygen furnace run mini mill, where the carbon dioxide emission is almost 2.2 ton per ton of finished steel production. learning curve, Mira has a very quick learning curve. You can learn the technology very well. It's a very easily repetitive technology. And not only that, learning curve does not only mean how fast you learn, but how fast you learn and start utilizing that plant, producing sellable product and selling that product into the market to achieve a quick ROI. So you can see Mira has also a very quick learning curve. Within 6 months, several of our plants have reached 100% of the productivity and up to 60% of the production in first 2 years of operation. Evaluation of Mira, CMC I've spoken about. The first plant we got commissioned in 2008. In Greece, side note Sovel, we first produced the endless puller line, that is rebar in coil form, in the year of 2012. First Octocaster, 2013. First twin Mira plant in China, 2013. First Mira producing plant having light sections as the finished product in 2023. And first Jumbo Mira with high carbon wire rod production in 2025. First hybrid Mira, Pacific Steel, United States, which will run on solar power. The plant will get commissioned in 2028. That's a long way, starting from the conceptualization of the plant in 97 up to 2028. So we are talking about 30 years of research and development, hard work, conceptualization, and then acceptability in the market. Our media references. There's a short video I would like to play over here. So we have worldwide 29 references.
Thanks, Mr. Bhadra. I think this was really informative, and I think it provides a viable option for the small and medium scale manufacturers leveraging scrap to look into.
Absolutely.
And not just look at this from a sustainability point of view, but also have the cost economics in place to be able to scale up. I think picking up from here, and I think Rahul, given that you have experienced this technology, there are two questions that I wanted to get your thoughts on. One from a market lens, which is one reservation usually that the market has is how the quality of scrap-led manufactured steel be, and whether it would meet to the spec standards that are expected. So that's one aspect I'd like to understand from you. And from a producer's lens, I think given where scrap-based manufacturing is in the larger Tata Steel portfolio, what would be the critical considerations that would make this a meaningful portfolio mix going into future? So your understanding of what it would take from from a techno-economic point of view, from a supply chain point of view. I think that would be key takeaways for this forum.
So I think I must thank first Abhishek for having us on the last slide. As you asked, what from a consumer perspective, if I need to answer you first. So for a consumer today, if I buy a plastic bottle, I don't look at it where it is made, right? Tomorrow, if I'm buying a rebar for my house, it should not be carrying any, I would say, a plant stigma, right? It should be a plant agnostic product. It should conform to the standards of my brand, which is Tata Tiscon. Okay, irrespective of it is made from scrap or virgin raw material, right? So that's the idea behind this business. Now, you asked me what quality controls we want to put in. So first and foremost is the scrap that is getting in, right? That is where you control the quality today. And that is where scrap processing, segregation, use of today AI in scrap is coming in. Scrap is very heterogeneous, but you can still say that these are the tramp elements I want to avoid getting in. And you can sort, segregate at various stages of the supply chain to get the right quality of material into the furnace. Post that is the technology and the metallurgy. Okay. Once we get into the furnace, what Abhishek from Danelli was explaining is where secondary metallurgy comes into play. That how do you then do secondary refining to ensure that the final output is to your product standard or to your brand standard. For us, when we go to the market, we will not say that it is made of iron ore and coal, or it will be made from scrap. It will conform to a brand standard that is there. Sorry, what was the other question with you?
The other aspect from a producer lens, where scrap-based manufacturing is today in the portfolio mix of Tata Steel, what would it take for you to really scale it up to a meaningful contributor, and hence a view on the techno-economic and supply chain considerations that will support that scale up?
So if I have to look at technical, commercial, and obviously economic supply chain considerations, if I have to say. So one, today, in terms of, you have multiple product categories now, I'll put it that way. One is automotive, the other is construction, where you will have different products coming out with different stringent requirements. Now, across the world or across developed economies where scrap is surplus, you have all categories of products being made. We have started with the construction category in India in a full big scale in what was shown in Ludhiana. As the market matures in India in terms of scrap and availability, we will get into other categories of products. That's one. Second, if you remember from the first session, Mr. Ashish Anupam said that cost of manufacturing through a BF, BOF route versus an EF route has a variation of about $80 to $100, right? Now, Abhishek showed that you can cover up some portion of it through the technological intervention. But the balance has to have an economic viability to support this. So one is you can charge consumers as a green premium. The other is obviously a government support that is coming in, and the carbon markets that may come in. Because when we are using renewables as an energy source and we are charging scrap, our emissions could go down as low as 0.3, 0.4, as against 2.3, 2.4 in the normal BF, BOF route. So that carbon markets, which we are seeing today in Europe and in some draft notifications in India, will be an economic tilting factor towards it. The last was on the supply chain part, right? The supply chain, I think we are in the process of developing. But India or even the world, it does not have that kind of scrap. Today, world has about 500 million, 600 million, which is roughly about 30%, one-third of steel is made through scrap. So it's not one kind of one-stop solution, one bullet solution for decarbonization. So essentially this will become a meaningful portfolio as we go ahead. If scrap generation in India keeps up or is slightly more than the steel growth rate, right? Which government is really working on along with various association, various industries, that how do we increase the generation of scrap. Also, if you go by the life cycle approach, if you see, India started actually consuming a lot of scrap in early 2000s, which will come back only if I have to just take even 35-year cycle. It will come back post 2035. But you need to be prepared from a technology, from a supply chain, from a commercial point of view, to use that scrap when it comes in a bulk volume going ahead. So I think that's the way I would like to answer, put my points on this.
No, thanks, Rahul. I think we look forward to that period when the scrap really comes in and in big volumes to support these aspirations. Ritesh, I think one of the questions that the industry itself has today, as the formalization increases, you have large recyclers like the Tata Steels of the world coming in, you have JSW coming in. What's the natural evolution that you see for these small, maybe small to mid-sized informal recyclers, people who exist on the collection side today? What would be a natural pathway for them to kind of be a meaningful player in this overall value chain and supply chain?
So thanks for the question. So I would like to, answer it in two parts, in the way that you talked about two sets of peoples. The people who are very, very small, okay, informal guys. And second is the small recyclers. And you want to know how do they foresee themselves few years from now, especially when the big companies are also entering this space. So I feel as our consumption and demand grows, there is only one way to look at, and that way is to get organized. Basically pulling up the socks, standardizing your processes, ensuring there is a transparent flow of money, flow of collection of materials, and you are working with organized players. So the smaller guys who are organized right now, but they aspire to grow, they have to look at potential collaborations or developing their own niche markets to sustain and eventually grow by joining hands, by partnering, or by taking the working capitals from the bank required for expanding. But please keep in mind, for them, it's very important to note the demand is very regional and very pocket-wise. So they have to look at their end-use markets, which are the mills they can supply to, and accordingly plan a growth part for them. For the smaller informal guys, I will not say that they will be eventually vanished from the system. They can never go. They are here today. They were here 50 years ago. They will be in future. But the quantum of material which they have, which they process, will eventually keep on going down, keep on shrinking. As more and more, GST compliances, documentation compliances, and as the government also starts giving benefits to the consumer who are recycling their vehicles, slowly, people like you and me will also want to sell it to an established recycler or dismantler who can perhaps pick up the old car from our houses with no stress, and just we get a claim on the road tax or whatever incentives the government is giving us. And we would also not want to sell our car to a second-hand guy or a local kabadi, stuff like that. So the industry will grow, they should also aspire to grow.
Just to add to you, we are one of the customers to all these rack pickers, to be fair, and the smaller recyclers, right? So we have in past tried to organize, or rather we are in the process, I will not say in the past, but we are continuously in the phase of trying to bringing them into the formal economy. Large portion of them were informal, but as I said, government is very important stakeholder in this whole ecosystem. One is the policies, as well as the compliances, what he's talking about, is very important part of them getting into the formal economy. Maybe 20 years back, there were not enough people who would formalize that. But now, as an industry, steel makers are coming in trying to formalize this. It's not only about Tata Steel. There are many other peers or steel industry as a whole who is trying to organize. So they will find a place eventually.
No, fair point. I think there's no option but standardize and grow. And I think there is a aspect of responsible large brother that the likes of Tata Steel and JSW can play and have been playing. I think Abhigyan, one of your earlier points and the last set of inputs that you shared, it was interesting to note how the cables and the copper industry has been undertaking this practice. Maybe would you like to share some thoughts around kind of commercial models that have incentivized the different players in the value chain to kind of participate and make this happen?
So, Aviral, there are many aspects in terms of that. There are a lot of commercial terms when we do sort of negotiations we talk about. Like in our industry, there are different SKUs that have been there. So on a higher sizes cables where we use the high tension cables of higher sizes, so normally there are norms where you have to use the steel drums, for example. So you would be seeing while going around and seeing on your corners of the roads, a lot of underground cabling is happening right now across India. And that is an initiative which Government of India has taken by the norm regular discoms. So there are a lot of cases where we directly deals with the end users, like again Tata Steel, JSW, and all those. There are customers also. So where we have a buyback facilities in terms of the drums when we talk about. Because that is something it can be again reused. Why to leave it on the road and unnecessary it becomes a scrap. And till now, as it's not been so much formalized, so it becomes a junk for other roadside portions. When we talk about like this, so in our company like Fort Gloucester, so we have a very clear verdicts how we want to engage the customer, what the buybacks we can give it. One is this. One is again, normally the life cycle of a cable is very long. So few years back, it was like this industry will not grow, nothing will happen now, what will happen now? So as you currently see, the steel industry is growing again from last 4-5 years, like something very drastically. In the same way, the cable industry is also growing. So infrastructure is coming up, that's how. So we know there is again utilization of the cables and everything has been there. When it comes into such a manner, so earlier it was like the cable would be around about 25 years or 30 years, the life cycle will be there, we have to replace it. But fortunately, it not happens as such long. More scraps are from the system itself only. So buyback or something, this type of commercial is not through the manufacturers, but it's more about how, if they want to scrap it out, who are the right vendors you can utilize it, so that they can also get the benefit out of it, and then we can do the actual valuations. So the cost saving for them in terms of like that, if we involve them. And obviously, in some of the cases, it's very important how those designings can be done into cables. That is also very important in factor of that. As such, in commercial terms, manufacturers are not directly involved into terms of that, but more of a sub-vendors who are been involved in this all scraps and all those things. So then it becomes more important values. But I would, how should I say it? But it will not directly impact in terms of the commercial terms, because it's something which is not can be utilized by me, because I have to utilize the purest form of the metal while manufacturing any cable, and that's a quality part when Fort Gloucester comes into the picture, and that's how we do it. But in steel, it can be done in different ways, how it has been utilized. So that's the only one major impact which normally comes up, what are the raw material we are using it up. So we help the vendors, we help the end users in terms of attaching those vendors, how they can utilize it, and it depends how they want to again reuse that specific on there. Because for us, electrical is one of the critical equipments. We are doing something very critical for any plant or any manufacturing or any data center, something like that. So we can't use it by us, but yes, how the rest of the vendors can be helpful to the end users, it's more important for us. So that's how we deal it right now.
Great. I think great set of learnings. I'm sure as the steel industry evolves and evolves more into a formalization of this entire process and adoption of this route of manufacturing itself, these kind of models would be looked into and adopted at scale. Abhishek, if you are there, I think what you did share earlier had a significant focus on the EAF and the scrap-led pathway of manufacturing and an offering that you spoke of how it balances both sustainability and cost. Uh, when you look at the larger steel industry, it would be interesting to note and get an insight from your perspective, some of the practical decarbonization pathways that can be adopted uh, by the SSI industry more specifically, because that's where we see the larger bottleneck residing today, and perhaps the part of the steel manufacturing which would end up lagging behind in 10 years' time. So over to you if you could share your insights and thoughts there.
Mr. Abhishek, I hope you are with us and you are virtually with us. If you're able to hear us, can you respond to Aviral's question, please? Can we have the visuals?
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible. Please go ahead. I hope you have heard the question from Aviral.
Yes, yes, I heard the question. In fact, the thing is that I had a slide which could show that this sort of technology, it not only applicable to a plant where the starting material is scrap. We have a reference of hot metal route MIDA in India itself. The plant's name is Jairaj Ispat. The Tata Steel delegates know it very well because they have seen that plant with me on at least twice. Okay, and the result are same. The result are very much same because you know the moment you are producing the liquid steel, that difference vanishes whether it is starting from the scrap or it is starting from the hot metal. Then the effect of casting and rolling, that kind of technology always remains very much same. And the energy efficiency, which is more relevant to the small scale industry, because scrap is not that prevalent or famous among their process knowledge, but definitely they go for induction furnace route, they go for scrap plus DRI melting. And the moment you produce the liquid steel, MIDA is equally effective. Rather, I would like to show you a slide, one slide. If it is visible to you, have a look the way Jairaj is promoting this plant, and these are the figures you will easily get if you go to the official page of Jairaj in LinkedIn. I would like to focus some figures for you. 24 hours, 24 minutes, zero break. That's technology. That is irrelevant whether you have started with scrap or whether you have started with, hot metal or DRI. Imagine a plant which is running 24 hours, 24 minutes without any stoppage. Can you imagine the OPEX savings? Can you imagine the gain? Have a look at the continuous casting figure, 7.021 meter per minute. Have a look what Jairaj is saying. Jairaj Steel saved 70 crore per month by rethinking project execution. Have a look at the figure. At our Kurnool plant, we have reduced 63,000 tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year. And last but not the least, again, the record of 24 hours they themselves broke. Casting duration, 25 hours, 15 minutes. So, technology do help, getting you the benefits, definitely we are talking about circular technology over here, which Tata Steel will show the world yet again with scrap. But, I mean, technology boosts up and helping mitigating the aspect whether an end user is starting with DRI or scrap. And one thing I would like to tell you, it's also the culture how you manages the scrap. The commercial metal company, the Nucor Steel in USA, in their scrap processing facilities, I myself have seen it in my own eyes. They have this beautiful system where there is a counter at the entering of the scrap processing plant. A person who has, let's say, an old refrigerator in his house, he can come with that refrigerator in his car at the entry of the scrap processing unit. The entire car with that refrigerator unit's weight is taken. You dispose that, the refrigerator in the scrap processing unit. You are coming out of the plant. The weight of the car without the refrigerator is taken, so that whatever disposed weight you have given.
So I think we understood, and again, thanks for building up on what you shared earlier and how it has helped the companies you have worked with. I think in interest of time, I would now like to invite Abhigyan to share perspectives from Fort Gloucester in terms of their offerings for the steel industry.
So I think it's good evening or good afternoon, it's mid of that. So I would say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, M Junction, for this opportunity. I think I don't want to go with all these things because all steel stalwarts are sitting here, so I don't have to explain all those things. So this is something, this is a manufacturing boom or the steel is going on right now across India. And we are very fortunate as a part of the cable industry that we are one of the integral cohesive workers with you people. This is something small, how the India wire and cable market is specifically in size and growth trajectory if you see it. So around from last 2020, post-COVID, there has been a huge jump into the terms of the wire and cable industry, and that's how it has been there. And the manufacturing plays a vital role, whereas it's almost a jump of 16% into that activity. And steel is around about 2.5%, where we say yes, a lot of capex in everything, green fields and brown fields are coming up and right now going on also. We are working with a lot of steel manufacturers very closely in terms of that. So if you see the graph of the cable is also something like that. We are almost, growth has been around 5%. CAGR is something which has been there, which is very huge in terms of the infrastructure is growing across India right now. So in that terms itself also, we are very much involved with the steel industry and how the steel is being utilized in all the other sectors, from the automotives to chemicals and everywhere. So this is something which has been, we are very keen to be a part of that. These are a few greenfield and brownfield industrial waves which has been already going on. So there are a lot of industrial corridors which has been happening up across India. And I think government of India is very much keen to grow the manufacturing part. We are one of them. We want to be the part of them. As a group, whole group, we are also involved into the manufacturing of the jute. We are into the part of tea states, and obviously the wires and cables, which is forte for us. And right now we are very much involved in terms of all the new activity which is happening across India in terms of, say, the solar or renewable energies, or in terms of, say, data centers. So these all, as you are also very much involved into that, the quality which has been important. So cables is also something very important. It's a certified cables which we want to give it to you people also in terms of the quality. As we were discussing about the scrap and everything, unfortunately we can't use the scrap and give it to you. So that scrap has to be given to the sub vendors who are there and who can recycle it and give it, can utilize it in another manners. So small point why it is important for you people to have a very good sort of a cables in terms of the plant performance. It's very important. It's something which is the right, as I earlier told also while speaking there, that the cables are being not a small term or small things which you utilize for only 2 to 3 years. It's something which has been utilized into your plants from almost 25 to 30 years. That is something which is very important. And the first investment has to be great in terms of what type of quality of things you are buying it. Uh, then again, the automations in the industrial part has been on a higher note, where the control cables and automations has been very important for us. So it's not important that it should be a one-time cost which you are looking up. It's something which is the whole life cycle, which is very important. I personally believe in terms of how you grow, in terms of sustainability, that is also important, in terms of how sustainable products you are using it and how long tenure it can give it to you as it to part of your industry. It's just a small portfolio for us, what type of products we give in Fort Gloucester, India. So we give all your HT cables, LT cables, flexibles, aerial bunch cables and MV area cables, which have been utilized by you people itself into your plants, again with your all new projects and expansion projects everywhere. What is Fort Gloucester? It's one of the oldest legacy company. We are in the business from last 66 years. We are since 1958. It's one of the initial companies who was started at that time. We are based out in eastern part of India. Hub is Calcutta. And I think another hub for the steel industry also right now, there has been a certain changes really. So we are very much hopeful that things will move on, and we are looking for that. And eastern part of India is something which was a bit of a neglected portions, but now what we feel is something which is very much important. As see, the ports are there, roads are available, everything is been there. We are near to the south. We are almost catering every eastern part of India parallelly, and obviously very much hopeful to cater the other part of the world also sooner. That's it. I think every plant expansion starts with a cable decision. That's very important. Your procurement team would be doing that, but it's very critical for you people. And I hope you will make it the right one. Choosing Fort Gloucester or anyone, but choose the right cable. That is very important for you. Thank you very much. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Abhigyan. Now the floor is open for a few questions. If any of have any question, you can ask the panelist here in front of you. Though a lot of questions Aviral has fired at the panelists and they are all saturated. So can we have the microphone, please? Yeah.
Yeah, hello. I have a question from
Ma'am,
Rahul.
if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah,
please.
I am Rashmi Singh. I am from Manganese Ore India Limited, Nagpur. I have worked in SAIL also for 32 years. Now I am with MOIL for last 2.5 years. I have a question for Rahul. You are from Tata Steel, right?
Yeah, right.
So you said that basically you guys don't want to differentiate which route the rebars got manufactured from,
Absolutely.
whether they came from BF route or from scrap route. You don't want to differentiate. That is what you said initially, because you would like the quality to be same and it should be basically measured on quality parameter, not based on the input. Then you said that the cost of production for this green steel is higher, so you would like to market green steel separately, right? So these are two contradictory things. If you can just clarify.
So when I was trying to answer saying that should be a mill agnostic product, it was from a perspective of a consumer who is looking at from a product quality point of view. Say a tensile or the chemistry in terms of, or I would say the look and feel of the product, right? From a green premium today, at least in India or even if you go to Europe, the end consumer today is not ready to pay the green premium for the product, right? It is more from a, say today if I have to look at infrastructure, I am looking at a green building where I can reduce the overall carbon emission for that product. And for the steel industry itself, the carbon norms will help me, or the CBAM, similar to CBAM, or the carbon markets would help me recover a portion of it with lower emissions to produce that product. But if I was a layman or as a consumer today, it will be very difficult for me to pay a premium for a green rebar versus a normal rebar.
Right.
I would like to go for a right product. Today, say just to take it forward, my earlier example, today if you buy a Coke plastic bottle of 20 bucks, it is typically made from recyclable plastics, ocean plastics, right? But nobody pays a premium for that. But from a perspective of a company which is Coca-Cola, that is very important going ahead. Say not to go down in the mining industry and to preserve the natural resources for the next generation. So I was coming from the product quality
That's okay,
perspective.
but I feel that you will have to differentiate.
Yes,
Because, yeah, you will have to differentiate.
No,
That's
from
the
a
point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, from a superior product point of view, from a
Yes.
green